The moment my husband walked into that psychiatric evaluation room, smiling at me like I was already broken, I knew he had no idea what was about to happen. He had spent 18 months convincing doctors I was losing my mind. 18 months gaslighting me in front of my own family. 18 months waiting for the day a judge would sign the papers that would lock me away and hand him my $42 million inheritance. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to learn in our 12 years of marriage, was that I wasn't just the woman who inherited that money. I was the woman who wrote the will, and every single word in that document was a trap I had set years before I even met him. This is the story of how I let my husband believe he was destroying me, while I quietly destroyed everything he ever was. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and before I tell you what I did to my husband, you need to understand who I was before he ever entered my life. I graduated top of my class at Columbia Law School at 24 years old. By 28, I was the youngest senior partner in the history of Whitman, Crane & Associates, one of the most prestigious estate law firms on the East Coast. I built my career on one specialty, writing wills that couldn't be broken, not by greedy children, not by ex-spouses, not by anyone who hadn't earned the inheritance they were trying to claim. My clients called me the architect, because every will I wrote was a fortress, with hidden rooms only I knew about. When I was 31, my grandmother, Vivian Hayes, passed away. She was the matriarch of our family, the woman who built a real estate empire from nothing in 1962, when banks wouldn't even let women open accounts without a husband's signature. She left behind a $42 million estate, and she chose me, her only granddaughter, to inherit all of it. But here's the part nobody knew. I had written her will myself 3 years before she died, and I had built it with one purpose: to protect that money from any man who might one day try to take it from me, including the man I hadn't even met yet. I met Daniel Cross at a charity gala 6 months after my grandmother died. He was 38, a finance executive. Tall, charming, the kind of man who remembered the name of every waiter and asked thoughtful questions about your work. He didn't ask about my money, not once in those first 6 months. He didn't even know about my inheritance until I told him myself, after we'd been dating for over a year. I should have known then, because Daniel Cross had done his homework. What I learned much, much later, what I learned only because I'm the kind of woman who pays private investigators to watch the men who get close to her, was that Daniel had read about my inheritance in a Forbes article 8 months before we ever met. That charity gala, it wasn't a coincidence. He had been searching for me. But back then, I was 32 years old, exhausted from working 90-hour weeks, and I genuinely believed I had finally found a man who saw me as more than a bank account. We got married 14 months after we met, and for the first 3 years, it was perfect. That should have been my first warning. It started so small that I didn't even notice at first. I would set my keys on the kitchen counter. An hour later, they'd be in my purse. I'd swear I sent an email, only to find it sitting in my drafts folder. I'd reschedule a meeting, and somehow the new time would never make it into my calendar. At first, I blamed myself. I was working too hard. I wasn't sleeping enough. Maybe I was finally hitting the burnout everyone had warned me about. Then Daniel started helping. "Sweetheart, you forgot to pay the electric bill again. Don't worry, I took care of it. Honey, you missed your sister's birthday. I sent flowers from both of us. Eleanor, I think you should talk to someone. This isn't normal." He was so loving, so patient, so worried about me. And every member of my family started hearing about it. My mother, my sister, my closest friends. They all began calling me to check in, to ask if I was doing okay. By our 4th anniversary, half the people I loved believed I was losing my mind. But here's what Daniel didn't realize. I had spent 15 years building wills designed to expose people exactly like him. I knew every manipulation tactic, every gaslighting technique, every legal angle a man could use to declare a wealthy wife mentally incompetent. I had written the playbook, and the moment I noticed my keys had moved for the third time in 1 week, I knew. My husband was trying to steal my inheritance, and he had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead of him. The first thing I did was install cameras, tiny ones, the kind my firm used in elder abuse cases. I placed them in our kitchen, our bedroom, my home office, and the hallway leading to my study. The second thing I did was hire James Caldwell, the best private investigator in Manhattan, and a man who owed me a favor after I saved his sister's estate from her own predatory husband. I told James 3 things. 1, I needed to know everything about Daniel Cross, his debts, his finances, his past relationships. 2, I needed to know who he was talking to about me. And 3, I needed to know yesterday. Within 4 weeks, James handed me a folder so heavy it took 2 hands to lift. Daniel Cross had been married before, twice. Both wives had wealthy families. Both marriages had ended in mysterious mental health crises, where the wives signed over significant assets in exchange for divorces. The first wife was now living in a care facility in Vermont, medicated into a fog she would never escape. The second wife had committed suicide 8 months after their divorce. And Daniel? Daniel had walked away from both marriages with a combined $3.8 million. But I was the prize. I was the $42 million prize. I sat in my home office that night, looking at the photographs James had taken. Daniel meeting with a psychiatrist named Dr. Marcus Webb at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Daniel handing him an envelope. Dr. Webb nodding, putting it in his briefcase. Dr. Marcus Webb. The same psychiatrist Daniel had been begging me to see for evaluation for the past 2 months. I closed the folder. I poured myself a glass of wine. And then I called my grandmother's old lawyer, the only other person who had ever read the original will. And I said 5 words. It's time. Activate Clause 47. Clause 47 was something I had written into my grandmother's will 3 years before she died. It was a contingency, a trap that could only be activated by me, in writing, under specific circumstances. And once activated, it would change everything, silently, without anyone knowing the rules had shifted. Here's what Clause 47 did. The moment I activated it, the $42 million inheritance would be transferred, on paper only, into a blind trust. To everyone on the outside, including any judge, any psychiatrist, and any husband, the money would still appear to be in my name. But legally, it was no longer mine to give away. Not to a husband, not to a court-appointed guardian, not to anyone. Even if I were declared mentally incompetent, the money would not transfer to my legal guardian. It would transfer to a charity I had pre-selected, the Vivian Hayes Foundation for Women's Legal Protection. Daniel could have me committed to an asylum for the rest of my life, and he would walk away with nothing but legal fees. But I wasn't going to stop there, because just protecting the money wasn't enough. Daniel needed to be exposed. He needed to face what he had done, to me, to his first wife rotting in Vermont, to the second wife buried in New Jersey. So I let him think he was winning. For the next 4 months, I gave the performance of my life. I forgot appointments I had never made. I lost jewelry I had hidden in my office safe. I cried in front of my mother. I stared blankly at my sister during dinner. I let Daniel find me wandering our apartment building's lobby in my pajamas at 3 a.m. I wasn't really wandering. I had been waiting for him to discover me there. Daniel finally got me to agree to see Dr. Marcus Webb. I sat in that office. I cried. I told him I was scared of myself. I told him I was hearing things, forgetting things, that I didn't recognize my own life anymore. Dr. Webb nodded sympathetically and prescribed me medications I never took. What Dr. Webb didn't know was that every word of our session had been recorded, legally because New York is a one-party consent state, by the small device in my purse. What Dr. Webb really didn't know was that I had access to his bank records, courtesy of James Caldwell. And I could prove that Daniel had paid him $40,000 in cash over the past 8 months. By the time the psychiatric evaluation hearing was scheduled, I had 84 hours of recorded conversations between me and Daniel where he was actively gaslighting me. I had financial proof of his bribes to Dr. Webb. I had the testimonies of his first wife's sister and his second wife's mother, both of whom James had tracked down and convinced to speak. And I had Clause 47, sitting silently in the background, already activated. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in October. Daniel walked into that courtroom in a tailored navy suit, his face arranged in an expression of devastating concern. My family was there. His lawyer was there. Dr. Webb was there, ready to testify that I was a danger to myself. I sat at the defendant's table in a simple gray dress, looking small and tired. The judge, a woman named Honorable Patricia Rendell, who I had never met but whose career I had quietly studied for months, called the proceedings to order. Daniel's lawyer began his presentation. He laid out the case beautifully. My deteriorating mental state, my increasingly erratic behavior, my loving husband's desperate attempts to help. When he finished, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Cross, do you have legal representation present?" I stood up. I straightened my back. And for the first time in 18 months, I let her see who I really was. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I am representing myself. I am Eleanor Hayes, senior partner at Whitman, Crane & Associates, member of the New York Bar since 2019, and the author of more than 400 wills currently held in probate across this state. And with the court's permission, I would like to present evidence that my husband, Daniel Cross, has been criminally conspiring with Dr. Marcus Webb to have me falsely declared mentally incompetent for the purpose of stealing a $42 million inheritance." I will never forget Daniel's face in that moment, the slow dawning of horror, the way his charming mask cracked and fell away in real time. His lawyer turned to him and whispered something. Daniel shook his head, panicking. The judge raised her eyebrows and said, "Mrs. Hayes, please proceed." I presented everything: 84 hours of recordings, bank records showing Daniel's bribes, photographs from James's surveillance, the testimonies from his previous wives' families, Dr. Webb's complete medical history of professional misconduct, which I had pulled from 3 different state medical boards. It took 6 hours. The judge didn't take a single break. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, Dr. Marcus Webb had been arrested for medical fraud. Daniel Cross had been arrested for criminal conspiracy, fraud, and, once the investigations into his previous marriages reopened, eventually charged with the wrongful institutionalization of his first wife. His second wife's death? They reopened that case too. The investigation is still ongoing. Daniel got 14 years. Dr. Webb got 9. Both lost their licenses, their reputations, and every dollar they had ever made off the women they destroyed. As for me, I never touched the $42 million. I let it sit in the Vivian Hayes Foundation, where it still funds free legal representation for women trapped in marriages exactly like mine was. I went back to work. I made full partner. I rewrote my own will the following year. And every once in a while, when a young woman walks into my office shaking, terrified that her husband is trying to make her think she's losing her mind, I close the door. I sit beside her, and I tell her my story. Because the most dangerous mistake a man like Daniel Cross can make is underestimating the woman who wrote the rules. If you believe karma always finds its way, and that justice belongs to the women smart enough to claim it, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Your next story is waiting.